Welcome to the next installment of my video lecture series in economics. And in this particular video lecture, I'm going to be taking a look at some microeconomic theory that relates to the urban economics class. And the reason I'm doing all of this, as I probably stated previously in some of the other videos related to this particular section, is to make sure everybody's up to speed on the theory, economic theory or microeconomic theory, that is necessary for this course. So in this particular video lecture, I'm going to be taking a look at market equilibrium and the market surplus, so students can have a basic understanding of the surplus that's generated in a marketplace. So if we start with a market in equilibrium as we have here, we have our downward sloping demand curve in blue and the upward sloping supply curve in red. The equilibrium, as always, occurs where the supply and demand curves are equal to one another, that is, where they intersect one another. So we have an equilibrium price, PE0, and an equilibrium quantity, QE0. And what we want to know is the surplus that is generated. And to make sure everybody understands that there's two portions of total surplus, or as it's referred to here as market surplus. So here we have our demand curve that was just flashing, and then we have our supply curve that was flashing. And as you can notice here, we have two different colored areas. We have CS, which is the consumer surplus, in light blue. That is the area above price but below the demand curve. And the producer surplus, which is in a lighter red color, which is the area above the supply curve but below the equilibrium price. So the total market surplus is just the consumer surplus added to the producer surplus. So let's take a look here. If we have a price that is above the equilibrium, what happens in that instance? Okay? So as you can see, what happened is that a portion of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus no longer exists. That's because we have consumption that is below the equilibrium consumption level. So remember that producer and consumer surplus is generated when items are produced and sold and consumed in the marketplace. And since there is a lower quantity at this higher than the equilibrium price, this area here, this triangle, this upper triangle here, was consumer surplus that no longer exists because these are items between Q1 and QE0 that are no longer being produced and consumed, so therefore they don't generate consumer surplus. And also we have this lower triangle here, which used to be producer surplus, but since these are goods that are no longer being produced, they no longer generate consumer surplus. And also you can see that this rectangle in this area here is now producer surplus. So a portion of the consumer surplus is converted to producer surplus. So realize that when underproduction and underconsumption occurs, this is market surplus that no longer exists, and it is split between the consumer surplus and producer surplus that no longer exists.